Looking for financial insights you can trust?
How do you protect yourself as an investor? What's the strategy?
I think it's really simple. I think you just want to be diversified in your portfolio.
The Payne family brings real-world experience to every conversation.
Well, I think that's the problem right now is, right, a lot of people that are close to retirement, they're taking so much risks. And if we do get a big sell-off, it could derail their retirement.
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone, where today you have a front row seat to history. See, the mainstream media is flipping out because last Friday I forwarded a letter from former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez to President Donald Trump, making the case that he had been the target of a fraudulent and deeply flawed federal prosecution designed to remove him from office. Does this sound familiar? That caused me to read the entire transcript of his trial, in which the former president of Honduras, a pro-U.S., pro-Trump, anti-drug trafficking leader in Central America, was framed by the Justice Department of Joe Biden in order to get him out of the way. I read the entire trial transcript. I found two very curious things. There was no physical evidence against Hernandez. He was basically convicted on the basis of testimony from two convicted drug traffickers, both of whom had been prosecuted by his administration in Honduras, and both of whom got a get-out-of-jail-free card from the Biden Justice Department. And while I'm at it, let me mention that I received zero in compensation regarding my efforts on his behalf. Frankly, having been in this particular meat grinder myself, and having seen how my trial in Washington, D.C. was entirely rigged, I had enormous empathy for Juan Orlando Hernandez. That's why I had his wife and his daughters on my show this past weekend right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. During the trial, a federal law enforcement agent claimed that drug trafficking increased during Hernandez's time in office, when in fact it had decreased. Drug trafficking decreased because of Hernandez's stepped-up efforts to fight drug trafficking. Then the Manhattan judge overseeing the case rejected his motion for a retrial after Hernandez's lawyers argued the trial was tainted by false testimony from a law enforcement agent who said cocaine trafficking went up in Honduras when it actually went down. These are just a couple examples of the incredible corruption of this trial. Yet today, USA Today, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Reuters, CNN, of course. I don't get my news from CNN for the same reason I don't drink out of the toilet. They're all claiming that there's some inconsistency, that Donald Trump is fighting the narco traffickers in Venezuela while he's pardoning a narco trafficker in Honduras. The point is that Juan Orlando Hernandez is an innocent man who was framed by the same people who tried to frame Donald Trump, and who did successfully frame yours truly. Even though the special counsel Robert Mueller's final report, which the Department of Justice hid from my lawyers for years, when it was ultimately unveiled based on the orders of a federal judge, showed that the special counsel Robert Mueller had found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. This information, of course, was withheld from my defense attorneys at trial. So pardon me if I don't think that not every conviction in the Southern District of New York, or in Washington, D.C. for that matter, is accurate, true, or is came about on the basis of actual facts and evidence. In fact, I'd say just the opposite. When you have a left-wing activist judge, essentially a Democrat activist in black robes, the Constitution, the law, the evidence, the rules, the precedents, none of these things actually matter. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik from upstate New York is accusing the House Republican leadership and Democrats of blocking her efforts to force transparency regarding extremely abusive deep state behavior against President Trump and his top allies. In a pair of fiery statements released on X, the upstate Congresswoman said that Republicans control Congress and the White House, yet refuse to support her proposal, which insists on transparency. You see, Stefanik's legislation would require congressional disclosure when one of these sprawling counter-espionage investigations are opened, an accountability measure that she says is vital to prevent the future political abuses of the intelligence community or the Department of Justice. Stefanik tied her push to the origins of the Trump-Russian collusion investigation, citing a 2017 hearing in which she questioned former FBI Director James Comey about the launch of Crossfire Hurricane. She noted that Comey admitted proper notification procedures to the Congress were not followed, calling the episode a criminal act that can never happen again. Stefanik also noted that more recent abuses, such as the Arctic Frost wiretapping scandal, that's the scandal in which it was learned that Special Counsel Jack Smith was actively spying on Republican members of the Senate, Republican members of the House, and key supporters of President Donald Trump, such as yours truly, as well as New York's former mayor, Rudy Giuliani. She also noted that the leaking of conversations involving Steve Witkoff, who is the president's special envoy who's working overtime to try to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. Stefanik says that her language has passed the House Intelligence Committee in multiple Congresses, only to stall at this critical juncture. Congresswoman Stefanik attended a closed briefing which confirmed her claims, and then she called out Speaker Mike Johnson for siding with Jamie Raskin and Dan Goldman, as well as Eric Swalwell, to stop this simple provision. Stefanik warned that she'll vote against defense and intelligence bills until her language is restored, declaring them dead on arrival without it. Stefanik's outspoken defense of transparency and her willingness to call out spineless Republican leaders show why I believe she's actually the right choice to be New York's upcoming governor. I agree that we need to pressure Speaker Johnson and, frankly, all Republicans to support these basic reforms, which are the bare minimum that's necessary to ensure that nothing like the Russian collusion hoax ever happens again. If there are no major indictments against deep state criminals that stick, then there will be nothing stopping any future conspiracies from being hatched, and we'll never be able to trust the electoral process again. Meanwhile, officials at the Department of War say that all options are on the table in a growing investigation involving Senator Mark Kelly and the rest of the so-called seditious six. These are the Democrat members of Congress who released a public video urging active duty service members not to follow, quote, illegal or unconstitutional orders issued by the Commander-in-Chief. That would be Donald Trump, of course. The Department of War Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson said, all options are on the table at this moment, and we look forward to getting the Secretary of the Navy's review. And the Secretary of War has been very clear in his statements as well that he takes this entire matter extremely seriously and that these actions are unacceptable. People were shocked last week when I revealed that Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona hid his interest in a communist Chinese-controlled company which made surveillance balloons. That's right, the same kind of spy balloon that President Joe Biden let float all the way across the country before finally having it shot down over the ocean. Long after, of course, it had taken video of various defense installations in the United States and sent that information by computer back to communist China. Asked about whether a court-martial of Kelly was possible, the Department of War Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson told Jack Posobiec, my good friend, that the department is taking the matter extremely seriously. This controversy centers on Kelly's status as a retired naval officer drawing a pension, which could place him under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Wilson said the Department of War had referred the allegations to the Secretary of Navy, John Phelan, who has been tasked by the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to conduct a thorough review and report back by December 10th. The department has not indicated what disciplinary outcomes, if any, might follow, but they should have and make an example of Kelly, in my opinion, because his insubordination and subversion of the commander-in-chief are just not acceptable. Meanwhile, a new report by NPR, that's National Public Radio, paid for by you and I with our tax dollars, claims that the Afghani who was charged in last week's shooting of 2 National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C., including, as it turns out, the vicious murder of one, Guardswoman Sarah Beckstrom, showed that he had no personal crisis and that he was a radical Islamist. As I pointed out yesterday in the Stone Zone, I found it very, very curious that Ramanullah Lakwal, who was accused of murdering a Guardswoman Beckstrom, who died on Thanksgiving Day, and critically wounded a second guardsman, Andrew Wolf, who's still hospitalized and receiving treatment, actually entered this country in 2001. Now, by law, he should only have been able to apply for legal asylum for 1 year. But he didn't apply, nor did he get asylum in the United States until 2024. That's 3 years after the legal deadline. How could that be possible? Well, here's the answer, unfortunately. Unfortunately, this misguided individual, this murderer, was working for our CIA. According to the NPR report, people who worked closely with him before the attack described an emotional collapse in the months leading up to his shooting. A settlement volunteer who had assisted his family told NPR they saw no signs of radicalization. The case is complicated by the man's past. As I say, before seeking asylum, he reportedly served in the elite CIA-backed and trained Afghani unit, Zero Unit, fighting the Taliban. So it comes as no surprise that the effete leftists of NPR would create propaganda meant to take the onus off of radical Islam, as they don't want people to understand what is happening in this country or the danger that radical Islam poses to all Americans. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is pushing back sharply this week against reports from the Washington Post, among others, which claimed that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth ordered that everybody on a suspected narcotics boat be killed during a September strike in the Caribbean. Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson denounced that Washington Post story, said it misrepresented the facts, and that it fueled public confusion about the operation. Suddenly, the left is saying that Hegseth's orders, if indeed were issued by him, violate a war crime. Really? What about the tens of thousands of people killed by illegal drone strikes ordered by President Barack Obama? Were those war crimes? I believe they were. Once again, we see the two-tier justice system where Republicans and Trump supporters are held to a different standard than Democrats or those who worked for Barack Obama or Joe Biden. Thanks for tuning in. This is Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, where 5 days a week we talk politics. So please keep listening. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is Roger Stone. The holidays are here, and it's the time of year when travel, crowds, and cold weather mean one thing: everybody's getting sick. And in moments like this, you don't want to rely on the bureaucracy, the nonsense, or the slow-moving medical machine. You want control. You want to be prepared. You want options. That's why I want to tell you about All Family Pharmacy, a company that actually puts you in charge of your health. You can go to allfamilypharmacy.com/stone, place your order online, and a licensed physician reviews it. Once approved, your medication ships directly to your doorstep. Fast, private, and secure. So whether you're looking for ivermectin, antibiotics, or everyday maintenance medications, All Family Pharmacy now has you covered. No waiting rooms, no runaround, no interference. This holiday season, don't gamble with your health or your family's health. Stay prepared, stay protected, stay in control. Visit allfamilypharmacy.com/stone and now save 10% with code STONE10. Take charge of your health, because nobody cares about your freedom more than you do.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, I hope you're not having the same experience that I'm having. You see, Apple just did an update, but even before their update began, suddenly, without explanation, people I had saved in my contact literally for decades simply disappeared. Now, they didn't disappear entirely, meaning the thread is still there, but their name is no longer there. So what pops up is a phone number, and if you're smart enough to remember some key word from your previous text correspondence, you may be able to find people that you're looking for. The other day, I went to look for my good friend, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, only to find that, well, despite decades of our exchanging messages, he's no longer saved in my text feed. But it's not just that. After an update, various functions on the telephone, the cell phone, don't work as well as they did previously. So previously, if you took a screenshot or a photograph, it went immediately to the top of your photo roll, but no longer. Now, suddenly, I find that the phone automatically blocks when I try to open a link that's sent to me by email. You got to hand it to the folks of Apple. They took something that worked extremely well and now barely works at all. Now, some have suggested that this is really just designed to force me to buy a new and more expensive phone. I admit I'm using an Apple Pro 12, which I'm used to, and which until recently worked extremely well, but now barely works at all. Others have suggested I should abandon Apple entirely, given the millions of dollars they spent to try to stop Donald Trump from becoming president, and their active involvement in censorship. It's something I ought to think about. But if you can't depend on your cell phone to work, what can you depend on? Here's what I know. We've now moved into a very dangerous area where I think the folks at Apple are spending more time focusing on their development of artificial intelligence and less time servicing their current customers who rely on their cell phones. On the other hand, try spending a day without your cell phone, and you wonder how we functioned before we had them. Just think back to it. Having spent 50 years in the corroded rectum of the two-party system and been an active combatant in American politics, I can't even imagine what we did prior to having the cell phone. So I want to thank the folks at Apple. They took something that worked extremely well and they virtually destroyed it. I spent hours on the phone with Apple's customer service representatives who say, try this, try that, try this, but nothing has worked. So if you send me a text and I don't respond immediately, if you're among my circle of friends or contacts, please understand it's not personal. It simply means that you've disappeared entirely from the memory of my phone and I can't contact you. But you can always contact us here at the Roger Stone Show. Just go to Ask Stone at RogerStoneShow.com or Ask Stone at StoneZone.com. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
REI Co-op presents a perfect outdoor moment with the perfect gift.
Woo!
Picture this. You're ripping with your favorite person. Bluebird skies, blower powder, and frankly, you're skiing like legends.
So sick. Another lap?
Thanks to REI's curation, from lid to sticks, you nailed the gift.
No way. How'd you know?
Does it get more perfect than that? Give without guessing. Shop in store or visit REI.com.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Where we cover the news that virtually nobody else covers. Well, Costco, the wholesale corporation, has filed a federal lawsuit against the United States in order to block enforcement of President Donald Trump's tariff orders and try to recover duties the retailer says were wrongfully collected. The case was brought in the United States Court of International Trade, where Costco argues that the Trump administration exceeded its lawful authority by imposing wide-ranging import taxes without congressional approval. At the center of this is a challenge to Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which Costco says does not authorize any president to create or increase tariffs. Now, I believe that the courts have already addressed this, but Costco now says that it is racing against a procedural clock set by U.S. Customs and the Border Protection Agency, which plans to liquidate its important import entries beginning December 15th. So once finalized, those duties typically cannot be challenged or recovered. Costco wants a court order blocking enforcement, declaring the tariffs unlawful, and requiring that the government refund with interest the money that was already paid. So add Costco to the list of companies that do not want to put America first. We have to ask ourselves, are we going to be slaves to cheap, flimsy, poorly crafted consumer items imported from China, or are we going to reclaim our economic sovereignty and start supporting American production again, even if it means we have to pay a bit more to receive a higher quality product? Costco has shown that they're on the wrong side of history here. It's time for the Make America Great faithful to start cutting their membership cards to show that Costco and their actions are not appreciated by the American people. Meanwhile, President Trump has announced and the White House has confirmed that the president fired 8 immigration judges in New York City as the Trump administration escalates its court battles over deportations, a move that one judge reportedly described as a Monday afternoon massacre, and which I describe as music to the ears of myself and other Trump supporters. Immigration courts fall under the Department of Justice, and the dismissals come amid repeated clashes between judges who have blocked removals and federal officials pushing to speed up enforcement. The New York City hosts 3 immigration courts, including major complexes at 26 Federal Plaza, which also houses immigration and custom enforcement headquarters. Protesters have intensified outside the courts, with activists attempting to interfere with deportation proceedings and to disrupt ICE operations targeting criminal offenders. According to the New York Times, about 90 of the nation's roughly 600 immigration judges have been fired so far in 2025, a figure confirmed by both the Department of Justice and the National Association of Immigration Judges. 36 replacements have already been installed. Meanwhile, Democrat extremists in Capitol Hill are urging resistance to deportations and making despicable remarks about illegal orders to the military without being able to point to any allegedly illegal or unconstitutional action. Those comments are now under review by the Federal Department of Investigation. The administration knows that the shakeup is necessary to restore enforcement. This is about removing the insidious fifth column that's working to undermine the will of the American people in the most recent presidential election. If they are just getting fired, they'll be lucky. They deserve much worse for the damage that I think they're inflicting upon our nation. Meanwhile, Belgian authorities have detained former European Commission Vice President and longtime EU diplomat Federica Mogherini as part of an investigation into the alleged misuse of EU funds, according to multiple media sources. Homes and offices linked to the diplomat were reportedly searched, although no formal charges have yet been announced. Investigators reportedly searched the Brussels headquarters of the European External Action Service, which the diplomat headed from 2014 to 2019, as well as offices at the College of Europe, where she served as rector since 2020. This inquiry is said to involve the school's financing and governance during her tenure, including the purchase of a building that may have cost several million euros. Also detained were another senior College of Europe official, Stefano Semnino, a top European Commission figure who served as the Secretary General of the EEAS under Mogherini. Authorities say documents have been seized related to suspected procurement fraud, corruption, and conflicts of interest. This case has sent shockwaves through the EU institutions. given Mogherini's central role in the European diplomacy over the last decade. Combine this with the recent scandals regarding the inner circle of Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. Only a week ago, I drove down to Miami Beach to look at his $3.8 million beachfront condominium that you and I most likely paid for with our tax dollars. And it appears that the EU elites and their cronies, who once believed they were above the law, are finally being held to account for their financial crimes. And I say it's about time. These EU bureaucrats are the people who believe they should lord over us and be able to tell us to submit to vaccinations and their other biometric checkpoints. We must expose them and mock them thoroughly as we distance ourselves from their ridiculous globalist agenda. House Republicans on the House Financial Services Committee have released a 50-page report demonstrating how the Biden-era financial regulators orchestrated a coordinated debanking campaign against the cryptocurrency industry, which they called Operation Choke Point 2.0. The report provides hard evidence showing that at least 30 crypto-related businesses were squeezed out of the United States banking system, not through formal enforcement actions, but through quiet regulatory pressure exerted behind the scenes. According to the committee report, agencies including the Federal Reserve, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency used informal tools such as pause letters, non-objection letters, and behind-the-scenes guidance to discourage banks from working with these new digital asset firms. At the same time, the Securities and Exchange Commission adopted an enforce first, make rules never strategy, relying on enforcement cases rather than clear regulatory frameworks. This stunning report highlights the SAB 121 as a key rule that was used by the Biden administration to effectively block banks from offering crypto custody services. Committee Republicans noted that the tactics mirror the original Operation Choke Point of the early 2010s, which was applied to drugs and illegal weapons dealers when regulators pressured banks to avoid disfavored industries. Executives described surprise accounts closures, endless paperwork demands, and vague warnings about regulatory risk, leaving compliant businesses unable to operate. The Biden regime targeted cryptocurrency because it's decentralized and it poses a threat to centralized monetary control. President Trump is a crypto entrepreneur himself and has signed the Genius Act into law, finally providing a framework that allows crypto innovation while protecting consumer safety. This could end up being among the most important reforms as cryptocurrency shapes the future of our monetary system in ways that we're only beginning now to comprehend. Meanwhile, President Trump kept it short and sweet with a 3-word post on Truth Social regarding the fact that Dell has invested over $6 billion into Trump accounts. President Trump kept it very short and sweet with this 3-word post saying, "I love Dell," after tech magnate Michael Dell and his wife Susan Dell announced a monumental $6.25 billion commitment to fund Trump accounts for American children. The gift, hailed by Invest America as the largest philanthropic donation ever aimed specifically for U.S. children, is designed to jumpstart wealth creation from birth and promote long-term financial security. The Dell's $6.25 billion contribution expands Invest America's flagship program, commonly called Trump Accounts, adopted early this year as Trump's Big Beautiful Bill. That was, of course, the largest tax cut and regulatory cut in U.S. history. The program automatically seeds $1,000 into an investment account for every child born between 2025 and 2028. Now, according to Bloomberg, the new funds will be routed through the U.S. Department of the Treasury to cover an additional 25 million children ages 10 and under who today are not eligible for this government seeding. Dell says the focus will be on communities with medium incomes below $150,000 with the goal of reaching up to 80% of eligible children. The accounts will be invested in diversified, low-cost index funds and locked in until age 18, when funds can be used for education, housing, or even launching a business. This is the sort of corporate philanthropy, in opposition to George Soros funding left-wing agitation groups to sow mayhem, chaos, and violence, and manipulate elections, or even much better than Bill Gates funding evil population control measures in the third world. Finally, a program that can help the underprivileged and every child. It also shows that the big, beautiful bill as put forward by President Donald Trump is living up to its hype. Another promise delivered for by the Rushmore-worthy Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump. Meanwhile, new data shows the United States is pulling sharply ahead of its G7 peers when it comes to manufacturing, with the gap most visible versus Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. According to the S&P Global Purchasing Managers Index reading, U.S. factories continue expanding while much of Europe remains in contraction. The November U.S. PMI stands at 51.9%, its 10th expansion reading in 11 months, compared with Germany at 48.4%, France below 50%, and the UK only buried back in growth positive at 50.2%. New orders, a key leading indicator, are rising in the United States, but falling again in Germany and still extraordinarily weak in France. You see, the United States is experiencing economic growth while European countries are stagnating because the United States has rejected aggressive net zero mandates that are devastating energy-intensive industries in Europe. The U.S. has still cut carbon emissions. U.S. Energy Information Administration data shows that energy-related CO2 is down 18% since 2010, which is pretty much similar to Europe, but they're doing so, particularly under President Trump, without hollowing out domestic manufacturing. American firms also display stronger pricing power, healthier margins, and higher investment intent, aided by lower energy costs, lower taxes, and a more flexible regulatory environment. So, by contrast, European surveys consistently point to high electricity prices, carbon charges, environmental levies, and regulatory complexity as a drag on competitiveness. In the United States, reshoring and automation are boosting capacity and productivity. In Europe, firms are cutting costs and delaying projects. This is proof that President Trump's America First economic policies are actually working. Democrats want to take us in a direction towards Europe, even though their policies in Europe are clearly failing. We must circle the wagons around President Trump and tell the American public how America is entering a new golden age and how we must not jeopardize that by backsliding towards the high tax, high regulatory policies put forward by Democrats. There's no question, if you look at it objectively, that food prices are down, but they're not down as low as they were the last year of Donald Trump's first term. Gas prices are down, but they're not down as low as they were in the last year of Donald Trump's previous term as president. And interest rates need to be cut far more deeply because based on the current rate of inflation and the current rate of unemployment, a deeper cut in the Federal Reserve's interest rates are called for. Once that happens, I believe the economy will actually boom even stronger than it is today. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Please continue listening, and we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Well, Oregon's governor has threatened to arrest ICE officers, which to me is setting up a direct confrontation with the Trump administration. Oregon's governor, kind of a Rachel Maddow lookalike, Governor Tina Kotek. I honestly tell you, I saw a video of her on X. I couldn't tell whether it was a man or a woman, but I guess, well, maybe that's the idea. is setting up this confrontation, warning that her state may investigate and potentially charge federal immigration officers for actions taken inside Oregon. Evidently, the governor has never heard of the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. In a video message last week, Governor Kotek accused the Department of Homeland Security and ICE personnel of using excessive force enforcement, which he claims puts bystanders and local police at risk. Governor Kotek said, "I believe, as you do, in the rule of law and keeping our community safe." Well, that's inconsistent with her position that anybody who's in the country illegally, who has a criminal record, should not be deported. She also said, "We believe in being a welcoming place where immigrant and refugee communities help our state thrive. The ongoing violent actions of the Federal Department of Homeland Security are unacceptable, going after Oregonians and stoking fear in the name of immigration enforcement. If a federal officer breaks Oregon law, they'll be held accountable, just like anyone else." See, what Governor Kotek doesn't want to recognize is that these people are in the country illegally, and there is a priority given to those who have previous criminal records, either in their country of origin or here in the United States. But Oregon officials say they will monitor ICE operations closely and pursue investigations as warranted, not recognizing that under the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, any effort to prosecute federal officers for performing their duties in Oregon would be ultimately doomed to failure in the courts. The Trump administration has been investigating a troubling situation in Portland where law enforcement has allegedly been working closely with Antifa leaders to provide left-wing domestic terrorists a safe haven while they fight in the streets to impede enforcement of our immigration laws. It's clear that the rule of law is under attack in Democrat-run states and cities across the country. The actions of Governor Kotek, along with her rotund counterpart, J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, and her very special equivalent, Tim Walz in Minnesota, prove that there's a national emergency warranting federal intervention. It's time for President Donald Trump to take a page from presidents like Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln dealing with this particular constitutional crisis. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Europe on this past Tuesday of sabotaging the U.S.-led efforts in Ukraine, claiming that Kiev's allies don't have a peace agenda and are simply prolonging the war. Speaking before Kremlin talks with two U.S. envoys, Putin claimed that European governments rewrote proposals with demands that they knew were absolutely unacceptable to Russia, then blamed Moscow when progress stalled. Putin has reiterated his claim that Russia has no plans to attack Europe, while warning that any European war effort would be met right away. Putin's comments came as he hosted the two special envoys sent by President Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff and the president's very capable son-in-law, Jared Kushner, dispatched by the president to try to jumpstart talks after months of stalemate. Witkoff and Kushner are expected to meet with Vladimir Putin today for direct talks. The Kremlin said discussions would take as long as needed, while the U.S. pursued parallel tracks in Kyiv. Secretary Marco Rubio spent separate sessions with Ukrainian officials. While Putin is certainly a bad guy and should not be taken at his word, he may have a point about who's actually sabotaging the peace. For those who want to say, oh, Roger Stone, he's soft on Russia, I would remind you that it was me whose relatives were mowed down by Russian tanks in the streets of Budapest in 1956. I'm reminded when President Trump was asked during the presidential debates whether he favored victory for Russia or Ukraine, and his response was, "I want to see an end to the killing." It's time to end this particular meat grinder and end this war, because the only people who are profiting are the corrupt politicians in Ukraine and in the European nations who are siphoning millions of dollars from our war aid to the Ukrainians. I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for joining us today on the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Looking for financial insights you can trust?
How do you protect yourself as an investor? What's the strategy?
I think it's really simple. I think you just want to be diversified in your portfolio.
The Payne family brings real-world experience to every conversation.
Well, I think that's the problem right now is, right, a lot of people that are close to retirement, they're taking so much risks. And if we do get a big sell-off, it could derail their retirement.
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.